Okay, folks, I'm gonna go ahead and start working on my flower painting. So I've gotten this drawn really lightly with my 2H pencil, and I've tried to replicate closely to the guide on the worksheet that you were given. It doesn't have to be 100% exact, but you wanna be pretty close. So today we're gonna start with just two colors. I got some of my phthalo crimson, which is this kind of pinkish color, and I also got the hooker's green, the light hue, which is this sort of nice, clean green tone. So I've got those two out of my set, and then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put them in the sort of tray. Each one has its own dedicated space. Now, before I paint on this, I wanna make sure I have really nice, clean water, because I'm actually gonna do something called a wet on wet watercolor technique, which is where I'm gonna put my brush in some water, and it's loaded up, it's kind of wet, and I'm using a number 8. You could use a number 6, 8, or 10 for this, whatever you prefer, but I'm using a number 8. And I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna choose one petal, and I'm gonna go, and my job first, before I do anything to make this a wet on wet technique, is to wet the paper in the shape that I want to paint. And that's gonna be this first petal. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my brush, and I'm going through, and I'm just making sure that there's a nice even coat of water within that petal shape. So I'm gonna go right up to the edge, and I actually kind of got low so that I could be looking at it sort of from the side, from an angle, and I can see then that the light is reflected in the water. It should be evenly wet everywhere. You probably can't tell in the video, but now that is clean and it is wet. You can see a little bit. So then with my brush, I can just get a little bit of water on my brush, and I can put some in the tray, and I can start to pull a little bit of that green tone into the water. Now I don't want it to be too watery, that might be a little too much. I can pull in some more green, and I can mix it until it's a pretty even tone. Now this is gonna create shadow. This is the complementary color. My flower is gonna be pink. So it's pink is a shade of red, right? A tint of red actually, because it's red plus white. So I've got a tint of red, that's pink, and its complement is green. And we just finished our complementary color mixing chart. So we know adding green to red neutralizes it a little bit. So I'm gonna get my brush clean. I rinsed it. I can even then take a little paper towel and I can just sort of dab against it. I'm just sort of stroking along the side of it. And then I can go in, I can pick up a little bit of that green. And again, here near the bottom edge of my petal, I'm just gonna put some of that green right in here, sort of at the base of the petal where it would meet the middle of the flower. Just a little bit. And I'm kind of pulling it to that edge. So you can see it wants to spread because my water was wet, right? And so it's pulling the pigment. I'm just gonna let that happen. It's all good. I'm gonna rinse my brush out. I'm gonna go ahead now and I'm gonna repeat that process. This time I'm gonna pick up some of the phthalo crimson. So it's that nice sort of rich pinkish color. And then I can go over here and now I'm gonna go along the outer edge. Wow, that wants to spread right away. And I'm just delicately touching and painting it along the outer edge of sort of the top third of my petal. And I'm putting it in there, I'm guiding it along, and you can see it just wanted to go. It just wanted to spread on its own. And that's all I'm gonna do. I'm gonna leave that alone now for a minute. So now I'm washing my brush out. And again, I'm kind of like dragging it along this paper towel. So now it's kind of, it's not dry, but it's not saturated with water. And I'm gonna go in, and now I can go, and with this, I left some areas. I can just take my brush, and I'm gonna start to pull this pink in a few spots a little bit further down. I'm not gonna quite touch the green. I might get it right in the beginning of the green. It's not gonna totally touch because I don't wanna pull green tone up into this, but I'm gonna do these little sort of lines that are gonna give my flower a little bit of texture. And then once I've gotten it close down, now I can go in and just in this area, I can continue that. I can pull this into the green a little. And with these colors starting to mix, as the red, well, really the phthalo crimson, as the phthalo crimson comes in here and starts to touch the green, you'll see that kind of browns it out. That makes it less bright green and more sort of a neutral color. And I'm just kind of dabbing over it, all right? So now I've got this petal looks pretty good. Some areas are lighter, some are darker. Again, I can rinse my brush out. If I ever get an area where it's too saturated, if I can catch it while it's still dry, again, I'm dabbing my brush against my paper towel, tapering it. I can try to even pull some of the paint away with a clean brush. You know, if there's too much, I can work at it with some water to kind of lighten that up a little bit. But I've got that nice fluting in there, and that's working. So now, you know, I know how to do a petal. Now the big thing is I can go paint another one. So I'm loading my brush up nice and wet. I don't want to do this one or this one because that would be wet and they would run together. So I need to skip. And after I have skipped and left one that's nice and empty and clean and white, I can go to the next petal and I can repeat my process where I'm just going to wet it. Once I have it nice and wet everywhere, I can apply the hooker green to the base. I can put the phthalo crimson on the outside, and then I can work on doing some of my fluting. You can see when you do this the first time, like how different this green is from where it is in the one I finished already. But my process, you know, once I've gotten the hang of this, ooh, that was deep. Once I've done the process a couple times, it's gonna kind of go on its own. You're gonna get the hang of it pretty quickly. So again, about a third of my petal. I can dab a little bit against the edge. And again, I'm keeping a pretty nice white space in between. And the colors are gonna wanna run on their own, but then I can start to pull the pink, the phthalo crimson in some spots and get close to the green. And then again, once I get close to the green, then I can start to go back and forth and drag those colors in together so that they overlap a little bit more. But I want to be careful not to get much green up near the edge in this area. So I can pull down in and mix a little bit in there. I can soak up some of that color. But I got that fluting done and I'm good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna do that and then skip to the next one. And then there's a gap so I can skip to the next one. And then once these are dry, I can go start filling them back in. But that's how I'm gonna do the petals on my flower. To wrap up my flower, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get my small brush. This is just a 6. It's a, I don't know if you can catch the glare there. There we go. A nice little pointed brush. And I'm gonna do my wet on wet technique and I'm gonna use 2 colors. I'm gonna use the yellow ochre and, so that is right here, sorry. The yellow ochre, and I'm gonna use my burnt umber. So I've got a little bit in my palette, yellow ochre here, burnt umber here. So first I'm gonna get clean water and I'm going to fill in and moisten this kind of middle area and try to kind of stick to the contours. It might pick up a little bit of the color of stuff I did before, and it's gonna be okay. But I'm gonna fill that in, just so you guys know, I think in the next minute or so, that bell is gonna ring, but in the video. So if you hear it, it's not the bell ringing in real life, it's just in the video. So I got this nice sort of wet little pool. It's not dripping, but it's wet everywhere. And now I'm gonna pick up the yellow ochre. Now to do that, as I start to pick it up, it's starting to get a little skin on it. I got a decent color and I'm just gonna go in and I'm just gonna start to dab that around, go all the way to the edge, but I'm gonna do these little dots. And if it's a little too thin, I can add a little bit more. But I kind of want these dots. See, there's the bell, but that's not a real life bell. That's just this. I'm gonna kind of fill that in and I'm dotting it. I'm gonna rinse my brush out. And now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pick up some of that burnt umber, which is the darker brown. And again, I'm just gonna go ahead and dot some in. And I'm gonna try to kind of fill in some of the white areas where that dotting needs to happen. Again, I want to go all the way to the edge. Sometimes people avoid the edge and they have this weird sort of white halo at the edge where everything's sort of empty. And I don't want that. So I'm kind of filling in just these little dots so that hopefully I don't have any white spaces. And that's it. You know, I'm gonna let that go. Now you might say that looks too splotchy, Mr. McKay, and you might be right. So I can take my brush, I can sort of drag it along a paper towel a little bit, and I can go in and I can start to like, now that it's clean, I can muddle that up a little bit in some areas to help it mix if it's too separated, but I wanna be careful if there's like white pockets, but I don't wanna overmix. So now I'm just gonna let that be. I'm gonna let that settle and not really do much. And then when it's dry, I'm gonna do a tiny bit of detailing over top of it, and then I'll be finished. Oh wait, I forgot the most important part. With it still wet, it still has to be wet. I'm gonna take a little pinch of this salt. I've got these salt containers at various tables. I'm just gonna take a tiny pinch. But I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna sprinkle some salt in that area while it is still wet. It is so important that I do this when this is wet. So I've got salt. I wanna make sure those crystals kind of get everywhere. And I can even, you know, nudge them around to make sure they fill in with my brush a little bit. But that's gonna help my paint basically dry at different rates. And it's gonna give me kind of this star speckled effect that I'm really gonna enjoy once it's dry. So that's crucial. The salt is essential. Don't forget, just grab a little bit of salt from this container, a small pinch, sprinkle it just in that wet area. It's not gonna look like anything, but then when it dries, you'll see the reveal in a second of how that's gonna look when it's all done. Okay, so for the final step, everything's dry. I brushed all my salt off and you can kind of see it's like speckly. And now the last thing we're gonna do with this dry, I'm gonna grab a little bit of my burnt umber, and I might go in and I'm just gonna do some little sort of dashes, and I'm dry brushing over. And by dry brushing, what that means is I did not wet my paper ahead of time. I'm just going in and I'm kind of letting this overlap the edge of my floral piece. And I can water it down a little bit more. I can have different values in there. But if I'm going in and I'm doing these little dashes, that's gonna give it that kind of like fuzzy, sort of bristly. Now I could also pick up some of my yellow ochre and do some of that in here as well. And I don't have to cover up everything, you know, I can kind of let some of the natural speckling from the salt still show up. But I can go in and just, this is gonna give it that kind of like fuzzy texture, which, you know, if you're painting later in our project, like a stuffed animal or the inside of a flower or something like that, that might work a little bit better. But I can go in now and I can draw, you know, I can paint in the texture, especially if I have not wet the paper down ahead of time. This is gonna work out really, really well. But that's all you needed to do. And now you are finished. You did a flower. What do we think, folks?
Yeah! Skibody.
Okay, well, I'm editing that out. No! Okay, bye.